Ocean Pines is a vibrant residential community nestled on Maryland's eastern shore. With over 9 miles of waterfront property, amenities like an 18-hole championship golf course and a public yacht club, and a rich history dating back to 1968. Of course, if you live here, you probably know most of that. And if you don't, it's almost all apparent from your first visit. Each week on the Pines Cast, we work to bring out the ocean pines that might be less apparent. We celebrate the region, the amenities, and, most of all, the people who make and keep Ocean Pines a special place to live. Welcome to the Pines Cast, your source of news and insights about ocean pines and the official podcast of the Ocean Pines Association. This week we are speaking with Ocean Pines newsman and, of course, current Worcester County Commissioner Chip Bertino about his adventures in getting to and living in and then eventually representing Ocean Pines. I'm not going to tell you any more than that because he's a great speaker and it's a pleasure to talk to him. So let's get into it with Chip Bertino. But just remember to stay on at the end in case you want to know how to get in touch with me to make suggestions or comments. I'll have the information in the outro. But now, let's talk to Mr. Bertino. So we know that you've had kind of a storied career, but I want to, before I talk about what you've done recently, I want to talk about your relatively distant past. So can you tell me how you came to discover that Ocean Pines was a place and how you came to live in that place?
It was all related to a job that I took in Accomack, Virginia, of all places, about 35 years ago.
Wow.
And I fortunately got the job in Accomack, but had no place to live. My wife and I and our 2 kids at the time, and my in-laws had just built a place here in Ocean Pines, and they were kind enough to let us live in the house until our house in New Jersey sold. And for about a year or two, I commuted from Ocean Pines to Accomack, Virginia, an hour and a half one way, a 3-hour commute per day, until I was able to move to a different office in Ocean City. So we came down here in February of 1991, and we felt very much at home here in Ocean Pines. It felt like the community that we wanted to live in. And we were fortunate enough to raise our 3 children here, getting involved in the community. And it's been a wonderful experience.
Can I ask you what you did in Accomack?
Sure. I was in corporate advertising sales for a newspaper group that was headquartered at that time in Accomack, Virginia. And I traveled along the East Coast up to New York and New England, selling major accounts for newspaper advertising.
So I've made that trip before. And I cannot imagine doing it every day. That's those little towns, like every little town, you're like, oh, there's not much farther. But since every little town looks the same, once you get to like Parksley or whatever, it can be brutal.
The other part of it can be very frustrating are the speed limits.
Right.
Because you're going along at 55 and then you're down to 35. And I would, in full disclosure, I didn't always follow the 35 and I just kept sailing through. Fortunately, I didn't get that many tickets at the time, but those little towns, boy, they come out of the woodwork. The police doing their jobs. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I actually have I call it a ticket budget. I can drive as fast as I want until I get pulled over once.
Yeah.
And then once I get pulled over, then I have to behave myself for the rest of the trip. They always get me right before the stupid bridge. When I have to go over the bridge, that's when
that'll get you.
They're always there. You'd think I'd learn my lesson.
Well, the other part that really kills you is the points on your license. And what happened like 30 years ago, I ended up with 6 points on my license. And as a result, I had to end up going to remedial driving school. And I was there with a bunch of teenagers who were just getting their license. And I was the old man with the graying hair. And I felt so out of place. But it was a very interesting experience. And from that point, I've not gotten any tickets, knock on wood.
I've endured that as well. It is really one of the worst ways to spend a Saturday afternoon.
Oh, it's terrible.
And so, how long were you there before you struck out on your own?
I was about 9 years. There was another job in between. I was hired by a newspaper group in Dover, Delaware, independent newspapers, and I published for several years the Salisbury newspaper and the Crisfield newspaper before striking out, launching the Courier in 2000.
That's excellent. And I'm sorry, only because I'm interested for obvious reasons, I think, in newspaper history. What did they have? What did Independent have in Salisbury at the
We
time?
had the Salisbury News and Advertiser, which was a weekly paper at the
Oh,
time. And when I got there, I was given the opportunity to grow the paper editorially because, of course, the Daily Times at that point was a major player. And we did I believe we did put together a really good editorial product for about 3 or 4 years with some really quality journalists in covering the community as it had not been covered in the past by that particular paper. So it worked out. It worked out very well.
yes. I remember getting the Wycomico Weekly every 6 or 7 months and being like, if Salisbury had, now they have the Independent, and God bless
Yeah.
them. But
Yeah.
I remember getting that Wycomico Weekly and being like, man, why don't you just try? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, the News and Advertiser is long gone now, but for a period, it had its place in the sun. That's for sure.
And so you must have been involved with the community already. So how involved were you in the community before you started your own paper?
Here in Ocean Pines,
Yes, yes.
not very much because all of my efforts and time and energy were focused up in the Salisbury area because I was publisher up there. And so I spent a lot of time in Salisbury, and transitioning here to Ocean Pines was a bit scary. But I guess I either had the chutzpah or the arrogance to think that we could succeed. I don't know which, but it was a very challenging transition. But I was fortunate enough that it was a family endeavor, and we made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes early on, but you learn from those, and slowly but surely we gained acceptance in the community and got to know more people. But yeah, that first year or so was scary because I didn't have the connections that I had had in Salisbury.
Right. Yeah. No. And so can you locate us in time? About what year is this?
2000, we launched in September of 2000, and we did our very best that first year or so, and just struggled and just grit and bared it. Truthfully, we came into a marketplace that already had some very good newspapers here, and we were crashing the party basically. There were a lot of lonely nights and a lot of quiet introspection at the end of the day to question whether or not this was the right thing. But we survived. And then we had 9/11, which really was a challenge for us in the short term because of the uncertainty in the marketplace. And then we hit the Great Recession in 2008, 9, 10, 11. That was some scary stuff as well.
I was actually going to ask about that because one of the things that was a real difficulty in the larger market was, how heavily newspapers in general were relying on real estate. And, Ocean Pines, I think did okay even during the recession. Am I crazy, or is that right?
Yes. Well, as far as real estate was concerned, because we were the new person on the block, and as I mentioned earlier, didn't really have the connections. We didn't have a whole lot of real estate advertising at the time.
Ah,
We had a few ads, so that when that hit, and also the internet became a lot more viable as far as an advertising venue for realtors. Although we lost advertising, it wasn't the crux of our business at that time, which was either good or bad depending on how you look at it.
you had a smaller bump, I guess, to overcome.
What really was challenging was during the recession because at that point we really had to downsize. Not that we were large to begin with, but we had to downsize, and that was a very challenging experience, an excruciating experience for my wife and me. With redeveloping how the business was going to be run, and the folks that we would have with us, that was a real challenge. But we got through it, and we're still here.
And talk to me about covering your neighbors, because I know that, for instance, I live in Delmar, and every now and again, someone will have me go cover the town hall, and I'm like, oh, that's right. I remember why I hate doing this.
Yeah.
So, what was it like for you, especially so you're getting into the community as someone who's covering it as well as
Yeah.
someone who's living?
Yeah. Well, we had a number of writers. My father-in-law joined us and was a tremendous help as editor of the paper. I handled the advertising and production side. He handled the editorial side. And he had two or three writers, Bob Lasan for one. And so they would cover the meetings. One of the things that we took great pride in was that we just wrote the story and we did not take sides. We did not do editorials. We just wrote the stories and allowed our readers to form their own opinions. We were just a conduit for them to get the information as far as covering Ocean Pines Association meetings and later the county commissioner meetings. We just covered them. We did not take a position one way or the other, and I think that helped us because I recognized that we already had papers that were doing that, and I was more interested in getting information to the community than uh, extolling our opinions on a particular topic. Because quite truthfully, my opinion is no more important than any other person's opinion in the community. So I think we gained some respect in that regard.
That is super cool. And I'm sorry, before I move on too quickly, are there a couple of highlights you'd like to talk about? A couple of Ocean Pines related changes that you were part of covering that you thought are particularly noteworthy, people that
Yeah.
people would remember or at least should know about?
Well, I think the community center early on in the early 2000s was a big issue as to where that was going to be placed. If you recall, I'm sure the audience recalls, those of us who were been here a while, that the community center was a huge topic as to where it was going to be placed. At one point, it was going to be placed right in front of where the Veterans Memorial is right now, and that did not go over well. And so that was a big issue. The other one was the new yacht club, which was of particular interest to all of us as to what that would cost and where it would go, et cetera. So those were a couple of big issues. Another one on the county level was the county commissioners at that time were proposing an impact fee uh, for uh, for the community, well, for the entire county, and that, although may have had its merits, at that time was a big issue within the community because it could cost people who were just moving from one house to another in Ocean Pines an additional thousands of dollars that, quite truthfully, was very difficult to justify. So those were some of the big issues that come to mind um, as we're talking.
And how about socially? So what was your social life like in the early 90s and through to the 2000s at Ocean Pines?
Well, I was a geek in high school and never really had a social life, so that has continued with me up until this day. My social life is very much focused on my family, my wife and I, and a small circle of some really good friends. So Susan and I aren't partiers. We don't hit the bar scene or anything like that. We're rather homebodies. So that's pretty much. I know it's boring and dull, but that's the truth.
No, that's it's fine with me. It's one of the interesting things is we did the same thing in as much as we said why it was cool to be in Ocean Pines or what was cool
Mm.
about Ocean Pines, and it's weird to not like do those things. Like I'm not a golfer. I'm not. I mean, I'm a drinker. Don't get me wrong, but but I'm not a yacht club attendee. So it's interesting to try to see from a perspective of a third perspective, let's
Yeah.
say, what is valuable about
Well,
Ocean Pine.
when we were raising our children, we were very active in the various children's sports activities here in
Uh,
Ocean Pines. So, we certainly had relationships with the parents. My family, my wife and I are big boaters, so we avail ourselves of the boat ramp and spend a lot of time on the water when the weather's perfect. And my kids are boaters. So when the kids were growing up, a lot of times we found ourselves on our boat cruising down to behind Assateague to spend a day. And my wife was very much involved in St. John Newman Church and was a catechist for almost 20 years. So she was involved that way.
can you talk to me about like because boat ramps are another issue in Ocean Pines, like access, and it's
Mm.
it's it's very important
Yes.
to people. And can you tell me how that kind of affected your? Again, that's something that's personal and also professional. the idea of making sure that the waterways are well maintained and having, again, because you weren't on the board at the time, right? So this is an outsider's view, but a powerful one.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I think that Ocean Pines does a really good job with our boat ramps, and both at Mumford's Landing and at the end of Beecham Road. They've maintained them well through the years, so I really have no complaints other than the fact, especially on the holiday weekends, because we trailer our boat, when we have outsiders coming down from Delaware to use our boat ramps and clog things up and get in our way. That's a complaint, but I don't think there's anything that can be done about that. But our marina, fueling up at the gas stock, those folks there through the years have been exceptionally friendly and helpful. So we're very fortunate in that regard.
I do remember that as being an issue, whether and what kind of gas to have at the marina
Yeah.
when the ethanol started getting.
Well, Ron Fisher, who was the harbor master for a number of years, did it right. And he had the ethanol-free gas put in there. And he was a boater and fisherman himself. He knew the importance of that. And I think that has very much made a difference of the attraction of coming to the Ocean Pines Marina.
Well, and that was the thing at the time. It was funny. It's funny the things you learn, but all of a sudden you're like, no, regular gas will rot boats from the inside, and like
It
nobody
will.
was saying that.
And that was a very that was a shrewd marketing and operational decision that Ocean Pines made to just have the non-ethanol gas, because that is true. It does harm your engine and your gas tank, and so I always gas up at Ocean Pines.
Hey there, listeners. Are you in the Ocean Pines area and looking for a pharmacy that goes above and beyond? Look no further than Tidal Health Home Scripts. Open 6 days a week, our knowledgeable pharmacists are ready to fill your prescriptions in just minutes. Plus, we offer free home delivery in the Ocean Pines area and have a super convenient drive-through window. Need over-the-counter items? We've got a large selection. And with our monthly sales, you'll find everything you need at great prices. Conveniently located at the north gate of Ocean Pines, Tidal Health Home Scripts is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. To fill a prescription or arrange for a free home delivery, give us a call at 410-543-4769. That's 410-543-4769. Remember, that's Tidal Health Home Scripts, your trusted pharmacy partner.
And so, at some point, you decided to take a more active role in kind of the local and regional governance. Can you talk about that decision
Yeah.
and what that was
Yeah.
like?
Well, I covered the the Worcester County Commissioner meetings from starting in about late 2009. So I would go down to Snow Hill and cover the meetings for the paper. And I got a familiarity with the issues and the players and the individuals who were running county government. In 2013, late 2013, Commissioner Judy Boggs at that time announced that she was not going to run for a fourth term. And so the seat became open. I never had any desire to run for office, and I certainly wouldn't have done it if Judy had continued to serve in that capacity. But as some other individuals became interested in running for the position, I realized that I had at least an understanding of county government in the sense that I was covering it. And I've always had an interest in politics and governance. So I decided to, after a lot of conversation with a number of people in the community, certainly my wife, decided to make a run for it. And so I think it was December 22nd of 2013. I filed my papers to run for office. There were 3 challengers in the Republican primary that year, and I won, I think, by 12 votes when all was said and done, to be the Republican nominee for commissioner. And then going into the fall election, I was very humbled by the overwhelming response that I got and the votes that I got. And I've run 2 times since then, and I've just been very humbled by the entire experience.
Can you talk to me about making plans to do that first campaign? Because you have to, as you said, you have to first win the primary and then, gear up again for the general election. And what did you learn from time to time? Like, what were some big wins that you kept, and what were some, like, I don't know, regrettable moves that you decided not to repeat from that
Yeah.
first foray?
I will tell you that I was starting out. I was a very, very lousy candidate. And as someone who feels that he can speak publicly, I learned a lot about myself when I was running for office because until that time, I never had to advocate for myself and to put myself in a position as to what I could do for somebody else in the role as an elected official. And a good friend of mine, Jeanette Reynolds, was kind enough to hold a house party luncheon for me for my first campaign kickoff with a bunch of her lady friends. And they had a luncheon for me, and I was in her living room to sell myself to these ladies, and I did absolutely terrible. I was tripping over myself. I didn't know what I was saying or how to say it to express myself, and it was just so excruciatingly embarrassing for me. And this was among friends, although I knew Jeanette, obviously, but I didn't know the other ladies. And it was all over, and we endured it, and I'm perspiring, and it was just terrible. And one of her friends came over to me afterwards, who was a businesswoman and someone with a lot of horsepower, came over to me, and I think she took pity on me, and she took me aside and she said, "That was awful." And I said, "I know." And she said, and she gave me some pointers, some very quick, focused pointers. And I took that to heart, and I learned with each different gathering with people to better express myself, stay focused, and to recognize that they are looking at me as a candidate, as someone who's going to represent them. And that seems pretty obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time. And I realized that I did have a skill set that I could bring to the table. I can communicate effectively, and I just needed the confidence, and which I certainly didn't have early on. That's for sure. I was tripping all over myself and really questioning what I got myself into. But I think I've improved some since.
Well, it feels like also there's more at stake than not than there really is, but nothing has changed about you. You just have to remember that.
Right. And I'll tell you, you're by yourself as a candidate. Anyone who runs for office, regardless of the office, when all is said and done, regardless of the support you have, the people that you have around you, when all is said and done in those quiet moments of reflection, you're by yourself. And when you govern, you need to make decisions, and you have to be responsible for those decisions. And that's true even as a candidate. And I learned those things by falling on my face several times,
Mhm.
and learning from those experiences. I'm very much one who analyzes and deconstructs the situation so that hopefully the next time around I'll get at least a little bit better.
And that's the other question. So what have you what did you nail right from the beginning that kind of stayed nailed? Is there anything that kind of stands out that way?
Be honest and tell the truth. If I don't know something, I'll say it. I am a person of conviction. I may not always win a vote, but that doesn't mean that I'm wrong. But if I am wrong, I am very quick to admit it. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've said some things over the years to people that I regret, and I've always apologized to that person, because I think that recognizing that you're not always right is a strength, not a weakness. And if you can humble yourself and apologize to someone for something that you said that was absolutely stupid or out of line, I think that I believe that to be a strength, truthfully. And I've done that hopefully less and less as the years have gone by, because I try to be much more discreet and exercise much more discretion moving forward. And the other thing is, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. One of the things I did learn as soon as I got elected was that people looked at you as if all of a sudden you were emboldened by the information and knowledge and wisdom from the Almighty. And at least in my case, that was not true. And I didn't have all the answers. And a lot of times I struggled to get the answers, but I worked hard to make sure I got the answer.
And can you talk about a couple of victories as some things that you're particularly proud of from your time as a commissioner over these last several years, decade, geez.
Well, I think I'm most proud of the fact that I think that this community has given me a great gift to be able to represent them at the county level. And it's sometimes beyond that. And I hope that I've express my appreciation and thanks by doing a good job. We had some issues early on with the construction of the new Shao Elementary School. The cost of that was exploding upwards of $75 million. And I believe that I played a very effective role in ensuring that the cost of that came down by tens of millions of dollars. Our community was threatened by the possibility of a sports complex that could have been on 589, but that would have also put a great burden on our taxpayers here in Ocean Pines and across the county. And I like to think that played a part in ensuring that was not the case, that our taxpayers here in Ocean Pines, as well as the county, were not burdened by an ill-conceived project that, quite truthfully, would not have benefited our community or the county as it had been presented. And as of right now, there still is no sports complex that has been constructed. So I'm very pleased about that, especially since taxpayer money is not being used for that. There have been other wins, and they're smaller wins. If you're able to help an individual get something done from a zoning and planning and zoning standpoint, or if there's as silly as this sounds, but it's important, if there's a pothole in front of their house and you're able to get that fixed for them, or if they're having an issue with their water and sewer and you're able to cut through the red tape and get them in touch with the person that can help them. Those, although not as public, are just as important, if not more important for me, because they're the wins that make a difference in the lives of the individuals that I'm here to represent.
And it's shocking how much those small things matter. Recently, they, for no good reason, fixed my sidewalk in front of my house. And it just makes you feel like you're part of something that you didn't think you were a part of before, or maybe felt less a part of before. I think that's part of that.
Well, when we had COVID and the pandemic, dealing with that, I had a number of people here within Ocean Pines who would call me, usually older people who were struggling being able to, for instance, making appointments to get vaccinated. They couldn't figure out the online system. And one of the things that I was able to do, and I was very pleased to be able to do it, was that I could reach out to the health department and in some instances ask the health officer to call these people directly to get them the help that they needed. And we were able to do that. Look, as a government elected official, I'm here as a conduit for this community to be able to communicate and get things done through government. A lot of people look at government as solidified, like the Borg in Star Trek, it's just all encompassing. And government is made up of individuals who have ideas of their own, who struggle themselves, who have good days and bad days. But for the person in the community, they don't often know how they can access that person or get to that person. I can, and I'm very pleased to say that when I make a phone call to someone across the county, government agency, et cetera, they take my call, or my phone call is returned pretty quickly. So I have that to offer the folks that I represent, and I'm most humbled by that.
Excellent. And we are kind of coming up against it. We have some time, but I did want to ask, is there anything I should have asked and didn't, or something you thought you'd get the opportunity to say, but I didn't provide the opportunity? What would you have asked you?
Well, you asked what I was most proud of in my government service, and I think I've expressed that. But just as importantly, if not more, is family. I have 3 wonderful children. 2 are married, so I have 2 additional kids. Hopefully, the third will soon get married, and I have 4 grandchildren. And I got to tell you, as I talk with people in Ocean Pines, et cetera, we're all most proud of our families and our grandchildren, and I am no different in that regard. And truthfully, without my wife, who, I hate to admit this on the air, but if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be able to accomplish what I have, because she's been a tremendous rock, and she doesn't mind telling me when I'm wrong. And since we've been together 40 years, she said that an awful lot, but we're still together. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's one thing that comes to mind.
Oh, thank you very much. No, that is fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story.
Well, thank you very much.
The Pines Cast is an Ocean Pines Association production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo, executive producer, Linda Martin. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. If you are listening on your computer, just grab up your phone and type the word Pines Cast into your podcatcher. If you have an iPhone, that is Apple Podcasts. If you have an Android, it is often Spotify. Sometimes it is Amazon Music. Sometimes it is a third-party podcatcher that you've gotten. But if you have one of those, you already know it. and subscribe. That way, when this show comes out every other Friday, you can hear it. As I said up front, I love getting feedback, and I'm getting more and more of it, and that makes me so happy. So if you have something you want to tell me, you can email me. My email address is bytonyrusso@gmail.com. That is bytonyrusso@gmail.com. If you'd like me to read what you write to me, just say it in the email and I'll read it on the show. Otherwise, I will take it under advisement, as I've been doing with several of your really kind emails recently. So thank you to all of you who have reached out, and we will catch you next time on the Pines Cast.